Hi guys, my name is Kirsty and welcome back to Upside Down Books. Today we're going to be talking about The Good Wife of Bath by Karen Brooks, one of the best books I've ever read.
Non più tra I farfalloni amoroso, notte giorno di torno.
So it's been like a little while since I have reviewed a book independently. I've been doing like some vlog reviews and I was like waiting. I've been waiting for this book. I have been waiting for something that I'm just so excited to talk to you guys about, and this is it. This is the book. Go buy it. End of review. No, I'm kidding. But like seriously, just go and order yourself a copy. Do yourself a favor and read the best feminist historical fiction, romance, angsty, beautiful, bombastic thing you've ever read. So, first up, thank you very much to Harlequin for sending me a copy of this. So I actually really wanted to read this before it came out, not knowing how good it was going to be. I just sort of like the cover, beautiful, the gold foiling, stunning, and just the plot. It's set in the 1300s. It's a retelling of like the Good Wife's tale in the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, which I've not read and I don't know anything about, but I just thought it sounded amazing. So I was like, I need to read this book, and I did, and I loved it. This book is, oh my god. So Karen Brooks has written many other books. I don't know what they are. I've never read them. I've never, quite frankly, heard of Karen Brooks before, so obviously I need to amend that, so excuse me whilst I go and collect the rest of her novels. In fact, so according to Goodreads, she has 14 books, so we've got things like The Locksmith's Daughter, The Chocolate Maker's Wife, I tell a lie, I am familiar with that book, The Lady Brewer of London, Tallow, The Darkest Shores, Votive, Illumination, It's Time, Cassandra Klein, The Gaze of the Gorgon, and so on and so forth. So yeah, expect to see more Karen Brooks on my TBR. Oh my god, this book, where do we start? Where do we start with this? Let's start with some stats. So, it took me like maybe 10 days or so to read this book because I got really distracted and read other things in between, and it was the most glorious experience because it felt like I was reading this for a really long time. I felt like it was something I could just like delectably like dip into and out of as and when I felt like it. I just really enjoyed it, and I really hated like finishing this book. It was very upsetting that it had to finish. That's my only negative comment. So as of when I'm reviewing this, this has a 4.46 average rating on Goodreads. Granted, it has not been read by that many people yet. This came out at the very beginning of July, the 7th of July, 2021 when I'm reviewing this, so it is like a wee babbit. It's only just come out, and so I'm so excited for other people to read this and this to become like the best book that was ever written in the history of mankind, because I'm sure that's what's going to happen. Genre-wise, this is historical fiction. It is like feminist historical fiction, and I don't want the feminism to put anyone off, and goodness knows it shouldn't anyway, but it's like subtly feminist in the way that you've got a story about a strong female character and you get to the end of it and you're like, man, that had a really good feminist through line throughout the whole thing. So yeah, 1364 is when this book starts, and it follows Eleanor, who is 12 years old. So a religious man who she totally has the eyes for, because she's like this 12-year-old, but she knows that she was born under this, like the moon of Mars and Venus. I'm not very good with my star signs, but it basically means it's like war and like lust and passion, and she like mixes the two together really well. So she sees this hot priest and she's like, he's nice, I'm gonna make some eyes at him, and then he tries to rape her and she's like, oh no, that's a bad thing. But people find them, and of course she gets punished. I love history. So because she gets punished for being nearly raped, she actually gets married off to this guy who's like so much older than her, but I could never work out exactly how old anyone was. I was meant to look it up, but they say like 2 and something, but I don't think score is 10 years old. Like I don't think it's like 20, I think. I don't know. So anyway, she gets married off to this guy who's like seriously older than her. So that's your first 2 trigger warnings. There is rape in this, and there is minor adult relationship. And she's not too well pleased about this, but being married off at the age of 12 is not that unusual in this day and age. And she gets married off to this guy, and it's the first of 5 husbands. So that is what the original story is based off. Canterbury Tales itself is about like 29 pilgrims, and they're all sharing stories, and I think it's written as poetry, so they're poems. I haven't read it, I don't love poetry, so I'm probably not going to read the original. And Karen Brooks, the author, has read this and been like, 5 husbands? What happened to them? Like, how did she get through so many? Like, where did they go? And this is what this book is answering. This book is being like, who were the 5 husbands? Who was this wife? And what is her story? So the majority of the book is basically a chronological timeline that is going through the 5 husbands of the imagined stories that Karen Brooks has put with it. And there is a lot of themes of strong women. 90% of the main characters in this cast are women. There is one male character who is the character of Geoffrey Chaucer, the original author of the Canterbury Tales himself, and he plays like a really nice, almost feminine male character himself. There's just something very gentle about his nature, and I really liked him. So I'm not going to go too much into the plotline itself. I don't want to spoil anyone as to like what happens with the husbands and whatnot, but I will say that following trigger warnings that I would say, or content warnings perhaps, for this book is there is sex, there is violence, there is murder, there's a lot of grief, there's obviously rife sexism, there's a little bit of homophobia, there's like a good splash of everything you would expect from the 14th century, essentially. Now, this does read predominantly as historical fiction. It is about a woman's role all these hundreds of years ago and what it felt like to be this wife who, despite marrying on occasion some rich and wealthy husbands and being smarter than most of them, was so limited in her choices and her ability to do anything for herself in the way that people looked and treated her. It was so frustrating to follow Eleanor's story and how she felt herself being so smothered by society's like concept of what a woman is and what a woman can do. Now, there are surrounding strong female characters in here. We've got Alicent, who basically becomes like her god sibling. It's complicated. Read the book, you'll find out exactly how that relationship works, but she just acquires these people because Eleanor at the end of the day is this wonderful, lovely person. She kind of has this fantastically honest and relatable self-reflection of herself where she thinks she's a little bit brash, maybe a little bit too lusty, a little bit blunt in her own opinions, and maybe a little bit unpalatable for some people. But everyone around her loves her because at the end of the day, she's a really respectable person. She has this wonderful tenacity to keep getting up and going again when everybody around her has just smushed her into the dirt, and she cares so much at the end of the day about the people who work for her and she works with. And so we have Milda, who is like a not a servant but a maid who sticks with her for a really long time, and she's just this really quiet but really stoic character. And while she doesn't have the most central role to play, I just felt she was also a really important character because she was this wonderful parallel to like the passion and energy of Eleanor and of Alicent as well, and sort of showed the other ways that women can be really important and centric to their own stories. It was like there can be more than one type of powerful woman. And there were other characters that I really enjoyed who I'll mention by name but not talk about their character themselves because they come into the story later. I really liked Laudi, I quite liked Leda, and I also really liked Brasilia. She has the most tiny role, but I just think the way that she handled her particular plotline was just like respect, so much respect for her. So this was really incredible. So I think at the end of the day, what I really enjoyed was like the structure of the story itself. It was quite slow up until part 2. So this is divided into part 1 and part 2. And let me see if I can give you a visual depiction of how that split works because it's not quite half and half. So this is where part 2 sits. It's not quite halfway through the book. It's a little bit more towards the end. This is different to this half of the book. This has got more of a focus on women than this first part does. I won't tell you what it's about because I feel like that is a little bit of a spoiler towards the book's like story itself. But I just thought that particular section, that the very end of part 1 is just the pace really ramps up. So I found it not boring or anything like that, but slower paced for the very first part of the book, for part 1. And then suddenly it just takes off. So I read that last half of the book within about 2 sittings versus the 10 days it took me to just sort of slowly make my way through the first part, to give you some perspective there. I thought the writing was just incredible. The writing era, that like the era of writing that Brooks has used is quite fitting for the era that the story is set in, but it is not like Old English. It is more like the words she uses. For example, there are many different words other than sex that's used. I'm not even sure if the word sex is used in this book. There are words like swive and sarding and other language. I can only think of sexual examples, but there are things like that where it's sort of like different nouns and verbs that are used that completely make sense within context and you don't really need any explanation whilst you're reading the book. If it was out of context, maybe. And I thought that really helped to sort of get you in the zone and really bring you into that era and gave this sort of real like authentic feel to Brooks's writing itself to make it feel like well researched, because that would have taken so much effort to go through and like, get the tone right. So I have so much respect for her in that sense. But just the way that the stories are told, it was like so much respect for how well written this book is, and I am obsessed with it. I loved the overarching themes of it. I loved the relationship between Eleanor and Geoffrey, who is just like this solid rock for Eleanor throughout. They are like pen pals because they're often not in the same city. This is set in Bath in England, if that wasn't clear. And the kind of like the brutal honesty that they convey to each other in their letters was really fantastic, and something I'm totally envious of, and I wish I had a pen pal like that. And I just thought that the way he sees her and the way that him and Alison are always there and supporting Eleanor was this wonderful example of a really beautiful and cherished friendship between people. There isn't that like cattiness that you can get, or that is often portrayed between women who, instead of supporting each other, can try and put other people down. That's that real like issue that's often addressed in feminism and like sexism itself, is the way that women are sort of conditioned to put down other women who are doing well. It doesn't have any of that, and I loved that like Brooks has stayed away from that, and it is all about the support and just being there for your friends no matter how many times they make a really dumb decision. And the older that Eleanor gets in the story, the more wisdom is added to like her array of weapons that she uses to navigate the world. But it doesn't feel like she gets that much older, because she's still human and she's still heavily flawed as a character. And it just made it such a rich read to get to the end of the book and be like, there are so many great lines in this, there are so many great themes in this, and you get this real sense of what it means to be a woman that is translatable to the 21st century, even though this is tales from the 14th century. And I thought that that was just done really well. It just felt like this big hug in a book to be like, you're enough as you are, you're okay as you are, and you have every right to take up space and to do what you need to do to get where you need to be. And I thought that the book just did that, conveyed that so well. So I am rating this 5 out of 5 stars. I think this will probably be my favorite read for the year. I'm gonna predict that now, but we'll see how I go. It's definitely my favorite read for the month when I read it. I highly recommend that you do read it. Even if you're not a big historical fiction reader, then I do think that this is still worth the read. It's obviously long. It is actually over 500 pages. It's about 530 pages, but there is some extra information in the back as well when it comes to like characters' names, who was real, who was fictitious, and things like that. So if you've read this book, then let me know down in the comments below what you thought of it, or let me know if you're planning on reading it. I would love to see. But other than that, I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.
Alle gloria militar